Good morning. We are beginning our second work session this morning, which is the 2025 Comprehensive Plan Update. And I failed to mention prior, people may be wondering why I'm chairing the meeting this morning. And Chair Marshall is joining us from home, and thank you for doing that. She was not feeling up to being in person this morning, but we appreciate her being online. So with that, we have Oliver. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning, Chair and Councillors. For the record, Oliver Ojako, Community Planning Directors. Councillors, this is a continuation of our informational work session with Council. We also are having similar informational work session with the Planning Commission. So today we'll be going over a few chapters with you. We know that these we have about 15 chapters or more. We want to be coming to you gradually and sharing this, the chapters with you, and hopefully glean some direction from you, a discussion from you. All of these chapters will be put in compiled together to become the comprehensive plan document, which will be part of your hearing when we come before you in your hearing. So today we'll go over the review of the chapters before you. We will also be discussing the mobile home park. We did submit a memo to the council. We will have a housing consultant who is helping us with this particular work to provide you an overview, and that we will seek direction from council on how to proceed with development of a mobile home park as a result of your moratorium on redevelopment of existing mobile home park in the unincorporated area. So that will be part of our discussion today, and then we'll share with you upcoming work sessions. Today is going to be a little bit different. I have various staff here who have been working with, for example, Susan and Harrison, in our transportation planning staff. They've been working with our consultant on the transportation component of our process, including analysis based on the preferred plan and coming up with a project list to support that, and they will be discussing that with you this morning. What I will add is that we have also been working internally with Public Works, reviewing the same project list. We don't have the cost yet. That will be coming to you in the upcoming work session so that we can share with you what the cost will be, including revenue and estimated expenditure to bring all the project listed on the 20-year project list. It doesn't mean we have to fund them all, but we will provide that information to you. Let's go to the next slide, please. So today we'll start with the review of the chapters. Go to the next slide, please. As I have checked in with council in our last work session, I believe it was in June 10th, we shared with council that our review of the chapters are based on new legislative bills that have been passed, and we are required to update various chapters to make sure that our comprehensive required, particularly mandated elements, are consistent with new bills that the legislature have passed. We are reviewing the chapter also for clarity so that it's easy for the public and the council and all to understand. We are also looking at any potential Scrivener errors so that we can take this opportunity to correct those. Another thing we are doing is reviewing the chapters with various advisory groups and internal affected departments. So that's the process we have been taking. All these chapters are also posted on the on our project web list or website where the public can also review these chapters with you. They're all draft, and it will remain draft until the council makes the final revisions or make the final vote before we can formalize it and resubmit it back to the state as the final action that the council have taken. So let's go to the next slide. So, councillors, we will start with the transportation project list and the evaluation criteria that was used to come up with the project list. Following that, and Harrison and Susan will be going over that. Following that, we will then go to land use, housing, rural, and then we'll get to the mobile home park. That's the order of discussion with you this morning. What I will also add is that when we get to housing or land use, particularly land use, I will highlight some new policies that are in that chapter and how we arrived at those new policies. They are new. And then I will highlight some of the discussions that we have that took place through our monthly meeting with local jurisdictions, some of the concerns that were raised, and I will share that with you. Again, this is not a hearing, not asking you to make any decision, but at least to be aware of the discussions we have with local jurisdiction as it comes to countywide planning policies. So with that, let me turn it over to Harrison and Susan to go over the transportation project list and the criteria they use in arriving at those. So Harrison and Susan, take it away.
All right. Good morning, Council. For the record, my name is Harrison Houston. I'm a transportation planner with Community Planning, and I'm here today to provide you all with a glimpse of what we will be proposing for the 20-year Transportation Capital Facilities Plan, or CFP. And before we get into the specifics related to some of the changes that we'll kind of go over with you today, we did want to just preference our presentation with some important notes kind of beforehand. So first, we just wanted to kind of let you know that the contents of this project list is still in draft form. Due to our timing, it's been prepared using the DEIS Land Use 2 alternative and the Regional Travel Demand Model output completed in fall 2025. We use the ALT2 as a placeholder to be able to provide you with some information before our July 23rd submission date. And because it was the closest alternative to the preferred that was recommended and provided by Planning Commission in January 2026. We've received the updated regional travel demand model about 2 weeks ago, and our consultant is working on interpreting those results and reconciling this draft list to address any changes prior to our next scheduled work session on July 15th. From what we've been told by our consultant and RTC, who kind of, they maintain the model for the region, the changes will be pretty minimal. So while this is a draft based on a slightly different land use scenario, for the most part, the draft CFP project list that you see here will remain mostly the same. And kind of our second thing we wanted to just let you know ahead of time is, I know at first glance, this seems like a really long list. And while we call our 20-year transportation CFP, while we call it our 20-year transportation CFP, we are not necessarily required to complete every project on this list within a 20-year timeframe. Within GMA, it requires that we analyze and assess our transportation system for current and future needs, identify those needs, and identify the specific actions that we will take to address those needs. So this project list really just fulfills those requirements. And the list is also longer than the previous plan as a result of some mandated, new mandated requirements. And then kind of the third and last note that I'll just mention, and as kind of Oliver alluded to, there are a few elements of this list that are missing today that we're currently working towards to include in the future draft, which again, you'll see most likely on July 15th. So those elements include cost estimates and a prioritization. So we'll briefly touch on the proposed approach to prioritize the draft project list at the end of the presentation. But to reiterate, we wanted to provide you with basically enough lead time to digest all this information. So if you can go to the next slide. So as a review, the current adopted transportation CFP was last updated in 2020 with an amendment in 2022 to adjust the project cost estimates for inflation and update the traffic impact fee rates. From the existing CFP project list, we are proposing to remove 3 large capital road projects and 11 intersection projects. The large capital road projects are all projects that have been constructed over the last 5 years. And some of the intersection projects have been constructed or improved. Others have been annexed by other jurisdictions. However, the majority of them, we're no longer seeing the PM peak volumes that would suggest the need for signalization or additional mitigation. And that is just a brief, that's just kind of briefly about some of the changes you'll see from the existing CFP project list. But for the proposed CFP for 2025 to 2045, we are recommending adding 3 large capital projects. And I'll also note there are some additional kind of potential large projects that you will see listed in the regional and partnership project section on page 22. And those are projects where we're seeing needs for some type of improvement. However, they are dependent on WashDOT completing some of their planned projects or just some additional coordination with WashDOT to see if they're even possible. And then we're also proposing to add about 20 new intersections as well. I will say, I think the biggest change that you will see with the proposed CFP project list is the inclusion of standalone active transportation projects. This is a result of new GMA requirements that came out of House Bill 1181 back in 2023. I think during a council work session back in June of 2025, we reviewed some of the new requirements, which include establishing multimodal level of service standards with separate standards for active transportation facilities. And we're happy to answer any questions today about those new requirements, but I think we would direct you back to the June work session for more detailed information about it. And then we're also recommending to add 8 standalone safety-related projects. These projects were identified through the county's 2025 local road safety plan that was developed in a collaborative process with RTC. And then lastly, we have a section for regional and partnership projects. I would say that most of those, if not all, are new, and we'll kind of review kind of those and what those mean in a little more detail later in the slides. So next slide, please. So in addition to basically the changes in the number of projects in the list, we wanted to kind of briefly touch on some of the overall change you'll see in the proposed CFP. So I would say that kind of the first major change is that we'll be breaking up different projects into general categories. So as listed, we have our large capital projects, which are your kind of traditional CFP projects that involve constructing a new road or reconstructing a current one to add vehicle capacity. You'll have the active transportation projects, which really highlight improvements that need to occur for pedestrians and for bicyclists. And then there'll be the safety projects, which are improvements or countermeasures to address existing safety concerns. And then, as I mentioned, the regional and partnership projects are projects that involved or that will need to involve close coordination with other jurisdictions and agencies. So I will say for this category, you will see a lot of WashDOT projects. Per GMA, we're required to document all of the impacts that our growth will have on state facilities. While we document these impacts for the state, there isn't necessarily a commitment from the state to make these improvements. I will just note the WashDOT's capital funding is appropriated by the state legislature. So for the funding to be in place for these improvements and for WashDOT to really have the directive to make it, I would say maybe there'd be a need from council to work with the Southwest delegation to kind of coordinate that. And then let's see here. Yeah, and another major change you'll also see is the inclusion of project descriptions. If you look at the project list in the 2016 comp plan, which is found in Appendix A, you'll really only see kind of project locations, project limits, and the cost estimates for each project. And our goal with including the descriptions is, to clearly document our assumptions and to be more transparent about the type of improvements to expect at each location as well. And then kind of lastly on the slide, that's important to know, we have also kind of gone through an exercise with Public Works to try to distinguish where we are likely to consider roundabout intersection improvements versus a traffic signal, really based on existing conditions and context of the intersection. And kind of just a caveat, I know while we're anticipating what control type will go at each intersection, we'll still need to do an independent kind of intersection control evaluation at the beginning of each project to determine really what the best control type would be for that location. And then if you can go to the next slide. And then because active transportation is one of the kind of more significant changes to the project list, we did want to just spend some time and review this with you all. So these projects really reflect corridors that have been identified as needing additional improvements for active transportation users. With the proposed multimodal level of service standards, we're proposing that facilities would be provided that would be low stress and comfortable for most adults. That's kind of the standard that we're aiming for. And there's a lot of information in that table in that category, which we might modify slightly just to make it a little bit more easier to read. But I think I would say that the most important columns to note are the proposed bicycle facility types, the estimated linear feet of sidewalk that's missing from each corridor, and the number of potential new pedestrian crossings that would be needed to support basically the future built out land use scenario. And kind of while we're on the topic of active transportation, we'll also just kind of note that we've been working extensively to involve the county's Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee throughout this process. They will be forwarding quite a few recommendations for your consideration as part of the comp plan adoption. And at our kind of last meeting in June, they voted on a number of recommendations, and they voted unanimously to forward a recommendation to approve the basically the draft active transportation list that you see here. So let's see here. And if we can go to the next slide. And then for kind of our last slide today on this topic, we just wanted to review the approach that we plan to use to prioritize this project list. And we've gone through a process of developing an evaluation framework based on kind of the proposed policies within the comp plan to measure really how well the investment in each of these projects help advance the overall goals and policies of the comp plan. And I think we provided the proposed goals and policies for the transportation element or chapter in a work session last year. And after making those proposed changes, we went through an exercise to identify policies and really themes within those policy and themes within the policies that we could potentially measure over time. And from those policies and themes, we identified roughly 11 criteria, which are listed in the slide for you. And the criteria group that you see on the left relate, or they tie directly back to one of the transportation elements 10 goals. And then you'll also find that the language that's being used for the criteria is very similar, if not word for word, with one of the with an existing or proposed policy that will be coming in front of you. And then really once we get a finalized project list, we will use these criteria to place projects into generalized categories. So either a low, medium, high, and that priority scheme will be meant to help guide really the timing of future implementation and when these projects should be considered for maybe the 6-year tip as well. So, and we're aiming to have the initial results of the prioritization for you all to review at the July 15th work session. So in 2 weeks. And if you can go to the next slide. I think that's all that we have today for the draft project list, but we're happy to answer any questions.
Council, Councilor Little.
Okay. Thank you. I had a question about this section and climate impacts or carbon emissions as one of the required criteria with the GMA. I just was curious how each one of these projects is, how you assess the climate impacts of each of these projects. Do you report it based on the number of cars or the number of bicycles or the efficiency of which a vehicle goes through an intersection post-project? How will you be reporting the impacts to climate?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I think we're happy to forward kind of our evaluation criteria if you would like to see it a little bit more, but we did go through a process. So as I mentioned, if you can actually go back to the last slide. So within our chapter itself, I think we are flagging which policies help us move the needle with like greenhouse gas reduction or VMT reduction. And so while you might not see it here, like some of these criteria can help move the needle. So like, so for VMT reduction, I would say like the criteria related to directing growth to urban centers or prioritizing transit or expanding the interconnected network for, active transportation, like those all relate back to, there's some type of VMT reduction related to those. And so, while we might not be directly measuring greenhouse gases, we are trying to know when like a criteria might contribute to like our goal of reducing those. I don't know if that makes as much sense, but
yeah. So there's certain decisions that have generally positive or negative impacts, but you don't specifically measure that. If you don't, I'd be curious if there are some ways to measure it specifically. We wouldn't have to follow up with maybe at the next session we could discuss a little bit more about specific. I'm just curious how you measure that, because I know that's one of the required criteria.
Any other questions?
Yes,
Go
Chair.
ahead, Chair. Go ahead, Chair.
Thank you. So thanks for the reminder that we may need to talk to our legislative delegation. We talk to them every session, and I know the I-5 and 179th interchange is one of those conversations we routinely have. And I was just wondering generally if we are on track, if the timing from the county side of implementing projects is on track, because I know it's tied directly to when the WashDOT will be doing their projects on I-5. And I think in the past there was some questions because there may have been some delays on our side, and there was questions about whether or not that money would still be available for the WashDOT part of the project. So if you could chat about that a little bit, would be great.
Are you asking about specifically for the 179th interchange?
Yes, just
Okay.
just specifically that.
It's still right. Jeremy, do you happen to know answer that? Okay.
And
Yeah.
and I'm just wondering if because I know the timing is really coordinated with WashDOT, and I just want to make sure that on our end we're following the timeline and there's not delays.
Good morning, Council and Chair Jeremy Provenziola, County Engineer. To report on that, I've heard no change from WashDOT on their expected schedule for the interchange. So no recent changes that I'm aware of on their end. We are still looking at 2029, I believe, to really begin construction on our projects adjacent to the interchange. And in the meantime, we're putting a lot of coordination with WashDOT into ensuring that if there were a disruption to the WashDOT schedule, we could still proceed with our work.
Great. Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
I've got a couple of questions here. Just really quickly, if you could, I don't think we need to go over the intersection changes, but I would request that you just briefly share maybe the three large capital projects that you have removed from the capital facilities plan and the three that you have added.
So we might need to follow up with you about the specific three that we are removing from the list. But I do know the reason that we're removing those projects are that they were constructed basically since the last CFP update. So I think it was, I think there was some intersection improvements at 99th and Highway 99. I think there was maybe a project on Northwest 10th Avenue between somewhere between 139th and 149th Street. And I need to recall the third project, but we can definitely follow up and have that
Sure.
information.
I think actually, that's enough of an answer there if it's because they were completed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the new ones added?
Yeah, the new ones added. So I think we have them listed on page 4 of 25. And so the first one is Northeast 152nd Avenue. So Patton Parkway to Ward Road. We're just seeing that is going to be seeing some congestion during the PM peak, and just additional widening might be needed or improvements to help mitigate that congestion on that corridor. And I think generally what we're seeing is in the area of Ward Road, we're seeing a lot of future needs for improvements. So really from 152nd all the way out to Davis, for the most part, we're kind of looking at future improvements. And so as part of that, because we're seeing a larger corridor need, we might be maybe as part of this comp plan, we might create a second section where we might be recommending like special studies or plans where it might just be a good idea to have like a full vision of what the entire corridor would look like before we even touch it. And so we might try to document that for you all to kind of see and kind of weigh in on as well. And then from the second one on our list is Northeast 172nd Avenue. This is a portion, it's kind of right there on the kind of East Vancouver. It's near Section 30 within the city of Vancouver. It's kind of an interesting area where I think kind of the annexation pattern where it kind of dips it's like it's the city, then the county owns a road, then city, and then the county owns a road. And so we're seeing basically there's another portion on this list that's existing from the last CFP from 18th to 39th that kind of sandwiches what the city has. And so we actually just had a conversation a little bit with the city earlier this week, try to get what their plans are for their portion of the road. And I think they said they were supportive with how we have it described in this project list. But I do see some probably future coordination with the city on that one. And just generally, I know there's just a lot of development happening out in that area as well. And then the next one for Highway, this one is Northeast 99th Street. So we did an improvement to this intersection, but it was the southbound approach to the intersection. And now we're seeing issues with the eastbound approach and the future scenario. And so, I don't think we would be proposing any additional widening because the road is already pretty wide as it is. And so we would just be looking at what additional improvements could we make to help provide mitigation. So I know it's a really bad, like the interstate really precludes like active transportation trips to and from each side of the interstate. So maybe coordinating with the state to improve those, and then maybe just looking at some signal timing, like what we can do to optimize the signal timing in that location as well. So combination of both.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Mhm.
And then just my last question, when you were speaking on active transportation, I heard the words "for most adults," and I was wondering if you could expand on that and kind of explain what the reasoning is, or whether that statement is entirely correct or.
Yeah. So this is a kind of, as I mentioned, a new requirement for jurisdictions planning under GMAs to adopt multimodal level of service standards. And so we went through the process of identifying basically a performance metric that we would want to use for active transportation. It aligns with kind of what's coming out of the state and the state's active transportation plan, but it's called level of traffic stress. And it's basically a ranking 1 through 4. 1 being very low stress, basically acceptable for all ages and ability. And then 4 is like the highest level of stress. And really, the understanding is those roadways would really only be used by those who are highly confident or using it out of sheer necessity. And so what we're proposing is an LTS2, which is low stress, and it kind of equates to facilities that are comfortable for most adults. That's kind of in layman terms, we would say, like in very technical terms, like our standard is LTS2, but it kind of, in more simple terms, it's meaning that we're planning for most adults.
Okay, and so like, hey, when you say most adults, I mean, my question is who gets left out?
Mm-hmm. I think it would be, so I think we can definitely follow up on that. Looking back at the state's active transportation plan, I think in their definition, they define like an LTS2 facility would be appropriate for basically anyone ages 8 and up to be unaccompanied. So maybe basically it would be leaving out maybe someone less than 8 years old.
Okay, and then I mean that's a topic for another day
Yeah.
for sure. But
Mhm.
thank you, I appreciate that. That clarification on there. I don't have any further questions. Are we ready to continue moving forward? Okay, great.
Okay. We can return back to, let's go to the land use chapter. Thank you, Harrison, and thank you. So, councillors, unlike what I did at the last work session, this time I want to walk through some of the chapters with you so that you can familiarize yourself with what is new and what hasn't changed. Last time I mentioned that we provided you a cross-check or a table that shows you existing, proposed, and the rationale for those changes. The reason I want to walk through with you on this chapter in particular is because we submitted a memo to you dated July 1st. I believe the councilors received that from the county manager. That memo really is an explanation of proposed countywide planning policy amendments without consensus. That's the subject matter of that memo. I believe council must have read the memo. It stated purpose, background, and then provided you with a summary of the discussions that we had with planning partners, in this case, the cities. If you scroll down, continue scrolling down until we get to policy dealing with, continue scrolling down, I'll get to that. I think it's policy 1.1.7. And councillors, while this is scrolling down, any of the items that are in yellow, you've seen that before. Anything in green is new. Just want to point that out. So let's go to policy 1.1.17. Yep. 1.1.17. So here, councillors, this is a proposed amendment to an existing countywide planning policy 1.1.17. The only thing added here is it's like the fourth bullet, utilize innovative program, including the transfer of development right. That is what is added in this particular policy. When we discussed this with our local jurisdiction, there were no objections to add this bullet here. And then the second bullet just clarified that we will be looking at how we will be relying on the Department of Commerce Housing for All planning tools and the persons per household number that is embedded in that tool. So there were no objections from our local jurisdictions. When you get to policy 1.1.24, that is the new proposed policy. Some of these policies that are new, but the 1.1.24, this is the policy that the three jurisdictions, the city of Los Santos, Richfield, and Commerce, along with the consultant working with them, proposed. We went through a lengthy discussion about this particular policy and arrived, what I would say, it wasn't consensus. The city of Vancouver wasn't supportive of this particular policy. You must have seen a memo from the city of Vancouver dated June 18th. In that memo, what the city is proposing, or the language that they are proposing, If you read their language from the memo, that memo went to the Planning Commission. We shared that with the Planning Commission, and I know that memo came to the council. It's dated June 18th, signed by Vancouver City Council member Eric Paulson, and it's on page 3 of that memo. If I may just indulge me to read that, it says the city is suggesting replacing this particular policy with their language, explore a regional transfer of development right program in consideration of program scope and goal, market feasibility, implementation mechanisms, and implications for housing affordability and HB 1220 of compliance, resource conservation, and long-term urban form allow cities to opt in or out on behalf of their jurisdiction area and UGA. This was not supportive of the other cities. So this is what I think, what I believe that the other cities are supporting, and this is why we're including this particular policy in the land use chapter. So I want to make that observation to you. There is another policy that the city, yeah.
I'd like to ask some questions about this. Could I?
Sure.
Just real quick, is it okay?
That's okay.
Are you done with the TDR part?
Yes, this is what the
Okay.
the majority is advancing, that it be a countywide planning policy. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for putting in some stuff about TDRs. Since I had the last discussion that I didn't want to get started on TDRs until we finished approving the comp plan, I did discuss, have some conversations with some experts in TDRs, including the folks who actually passed the law about 20 something years ago. And they did confirm that we do not need any section in here to implement a TDR program, although it's nice to have something in here. They said it's not required because it's already authorized under the law, so we don't have to codify it. But I do like that first section that you put in there that showed that TDRs are a recognized tool that we can use. This other section 1.1.24 is not the way that I would try to start a TDR program, especially the part about making it contingent on urban growth boundary expansions. That's exactly what I'm trying to avoid during the comp plan process. The reason why I said it previously, and I still stick to that, is that the conservation groups were posturing themselves legally to imply that they were going to challenge our decisions on urban growth boundary if we had a TDR, any kind of action on TDR that made it seem like we were tying a decision on egg conversion or anything to TDRs. So because of that, I would have liked to have a TDR program up and running right now. But because of that, I wanted to have no discussion about TDRs or decisions on contingency in this comp plan until after we have made a decision. Just so everyone is aware, I am planning to put a motion forward after we make a decision on the final comp plan that would propose how a comp plan would convene, what kind of decisions would be made by us to set it up, how it would operate. It would not necessarily be contingent on urban growth boundaries. It would be an innovative tool based on how other counties have done it. So this is my opinion, but I think it's actually dangerous for us to have 1.1.24 in the comp plan, and I would not support this language, but I do support including it as a tool that we can use, which we already know is based in law. That's my opinion. What do other counselors think?
I have a comment, Chair.
Go ahead, Chair.
I think you may be misinterpreting what some of the conservation organizations may be interested in, because I think they do support TDRs. And, you know, while it's been in state law year after year after year, I think incorporating it in here really gives it more weight in terms of actually implementing. And a TDR program does not need to be contingent upon expansion of growth boundaries, but if there is a desire to de-designate agriculture, this provides a mechanism to enable that to happen. Because right now, we don't have a mechanism for that to happen.
I do get that. This language is saying it is contingent upon the TDR program. So I would definitely, if we are going to keep this, I definitely want to work with you all to make sure that the language is very general, and that after the comp plan is passed, we can make some more specific guidelines about how a program would be set up. And my intent is to involve the whole county, not the whole, all the stakeholders in meetings, and it's not just driven by the county. So I just want to be careful that we keep very general language, and that we recognize that it's a tool that could be used, and that after the comp plan is passed, we make a decision. I'm not implying that the conservation groups do not think TDR program is a good thing to do, but I have seen them do legal posturing that would be the precursor for a lawsuit related to ag land if we have a provision that is very specific like this in here. And so I'm not in support of how it's written right now, but I think it's a good start.
I think that they have clearly stated that if we de-designate ag land, there will be a challenge. So I think there's no question about that. This is a way to, you know, and this was not just the county. This was something that Oliver and his staff worked out with all of the cities. So I think it's important to put it in, to have it in here. I think it will provide a tool so when there is a de-designation of ag that's justified to expand a growth boundary, there's a mechanism to do that, because we don't have that right now. And I think setting up a TDR program that isn't tied to a requirement to, if there's a de-designation, to have a TDR requirement, then I think we'll still not be able to de-designate ag land without this tool.
Councillors, it looks like our legal wants to say something. Go ahead, Amber.
Apologies, good morning, and thank you. Amber Smith, Chief Civil Deputy Prosecuting Attorney. I just wanted for a point of clarification. Councillor Little, you had stated that you would, your intention is in the future, after the comp plan goes through its final processes, that you wanted to bring forward a motion, and you stated to change rules and talk about the comp plan. Were you talking about TDR? I just want to clarify for the record that your intent was to bring forward a motion to talk about TDR programs, not about an overhaul of the comp plan.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you. I was just
a separate process using TDRs, which under current law, that will help our community do more appropriate growth.
My thoughts on this are, you know, I'm certainly open to further conversation, but initially I really like this language, because for me, you know, this it's about expansion. It's not about ag land. It's just simply about expansion. One of the frustrations that I've always had, and don't get me wrong, I don't have any problem with landowners benefiting from the increase in value of their land. However, when we move an urban growth boundary, just that technical action significantly increases the value of the land that's going to be introduced into the urban growth boundary. And again, I have no problems with private owners being able to benefit from that. But I also think that the community at large should and it could and should be able to benefit from that as well. So I am actually, with having more discussion to come on this, but initially looking at, I am very supportive of any expansions in the future being subject to a TDR.
Councillors, thank you. I just want to bring, the reason I wanted to point this out is based on the process that we have taken to get here, and that process is consistent with, as the memo I mentioned, the memo dated July 1st, 2026, which is, of course, is today. That memo, if you look at policy 1.1.12, 1.1.13, it lays out the process for initiating amendment or proposal of a new countywide planning policy. So that is really what that memo is intended for. As we had this discussion with local jurisdiction and as well as the consultant working with the cities of Richfield, La Center, and Commerce, I hear what you're saying, Councillor Little. I'm not advocating one way or the other. This is a draft. The council is not making a decision today. It only says that the Clark County and participating cities shall work cooperatively to adopt a countywide transfer of development right program to support mutual agreed upon conservation goals. It doesn't say that you have to tie this to any expansion now of any of the urban growth boundary. This is saying in the future, the city, that is post-plan adoption, the cities and the county shall work cooperatively to adopt a TDR program. That's what this is saying. And then listing out what it should include. So if you were to adopt this as part of the adoption of the plan itself, this would be done post-plan adoption. This is my understanding of how this is written.
Okay, well, let's just work together on language. I used to run 2 conservation groups that had attorneys, and I know how to look at language and use it to my advantage.
Okay.
And the way that you described it right there, I would totally 100% support it the way that you just described it. I don't want this to be limited also just to expansion of urban growth boundaries. The implications, as you know, for having a trade-off of any kind of development growth, having a trade-off on protecting farmland and open spaces, has so many implications and benefits to our county that is beyond urban growth boundary decisions, which is we don't make that decision very often. So I want to make sure that it would not limit us to just that, so that we can always have this trade-off. That is the great benefit of the TDR programs that other counties have used. It is a trade-off when you develop, you create more density, that you are creating a market incentive to also protect open space, farmland. And I want to make sure that it is something that the community builds and that we don't predetermine the boundaries of it. So let's just work together on the language. I think the intent is good.
Yeah, sure, councillors. And again, this is also, like I indicated, is something we shared with the Planning Commission, and it's open to the public to comment on this. You're not adopting it today, but it's just a draft language that the cities are advancing as part of a countywide planning policy. I wanted also to, if you can scroll down, I don't think there are any other, scroll down, thank you. I don't think there's any other countywide planning policy that is new here. So you've seen this before. So everything here that is in yellow, you have seen before. The only thing that is new is in the green area highlighted when we came before you last time. The other thing I would like to point out, councillors, is on the same memo that the city of Vancouver submitted, I want to recognize that they raised some concern on another policy, 1.1.14, If you can go to that, 1.1.14. 1.1.14. Keep on scrolling down a little bit. Okay, here, the only thing that is new here is we have included this policy. If you go to section, well, bullet 3, section C, it says the proposed zone change will generate greater economic benefit than the current comprehensive plan zone. That is the language that none of the cities objected to. However, the city of Vancouver wanted that to, their concern is that it may limit the ability of other cities to rezone employment land. So their suggested replacement reads again from the June 18th memo. They will prefer this language reading limit rezoning of employment land to other predominantly non-employment zone to cases where no overall negative economic impact is demonstrated or where other overriding community benefits are provided. After we discussed this at our city, county, and tribal meeting, the majority of the cities, other cities didn't have any objective or supportive of the city position. They are comfortable with the language that now says the proposed zone change will generate greater economic benefit than the current comprehensive plan zone allocation. So that is what we're advancing. The other item I want to highlight for council is, I don't think I have that here, but we came to the council, I believe, June 10th, and shared with you 10 chapters, including annexation. So Jeff, I don't know if you can go to June 10th work session and open up annexation chapter, please. So this is the annexation chapter. The council, you have seen this before. I just want to highlight that the city of Vancouver is also in their memo making a suggestion which other cities did not really go along with. So if you scroll down to policy, I think, I'm not sure which one, I think it's 12.01. 12.01, okay? 12.01, councillors, you can reach this. It says, each city and town shall adopt criteria for annexation. No, I think it's the first language. Community development plan shall contain an annexation element in collaboration with adjacent cities and town. Each city and town shall designate areas to be annexed. The city is suggesting deleting in coordination with adjacent cities, town and Clark County. Each city and town shall designate areas to be annexed. That's what they're asking council or rewriting this particular section of this policy to read. And after discussing with the other cities and having internal discussion with the city staff, of which one of their top staff wasn't present, we shared with the city staff that we don't see any need to strike out this provision because the goal here is to work cooperatively with any of the cities as they annex areas within their urban growth boundary as is stipulated in GMA. We are not requiring cities or towns to prepare a plan identifying what areas that they need to annex. If they do prepare a plan, we welcome that. So it will give the council and the county sufficient time to adjust and plan. Our goal is that the county, what I share with the city, the county doesn't oppose annexation. We want annexation that are balanced, and this doesn't require the cities, as I read it, to prepare a plan so that the county knows what areas that they're going to be annexing. So that's my view. If the council wants to change this policy, per the city memo, when we come to hearing and after the public wearing in, you can make a decision at that point. But at this point, county staff is not recommending any change to this particular annexation policy. This has been the policy we've had since this was adopted in '94. It doesn't preclude, because there is an annexation statute, it doesn't preclude any of the cities following annexation method that is prescribed in the annexation. So I don't see any need to delete this language as the city is proposing, but I just want to make sure that I captured this memo and the discussion we had with the group. So thank you for pulling this up. Let's go back to
Oliver, real
Yeah.
quick before we move from this one. Is it in collaboration that they're concerned about, or is it designating the areas to be annexed?
it is designating areas to be annexed. That's what they're concerned. They think that that language means that the cities have to prepare a plan. I know in the past, if I may, the city did have, through the interlocal agreement we had with the city following the 2007 plan adoption, the city put out annexation blueprint, which identify areas that they will be annexing. They haven't updated that plan, but the county is not requiring them to update it. That is up to them if they want to update that annexation blueprint. I know they came before the council to have a work session, their city manager and their planning director, I believe, and you asked that they work, that we continue the conversation with the city in coordination with the county manager. But, so I think that coordination will continue. I think their concern, to answer your question, is the language that said designate areas to be annexed. That's where I think that's their concern if I read their memo and the discussion we had with the City of Vancouver staff. So, but to me, I don't see any issue with this particular policy. It doesn't preclude cities following any annexation method or property owners initiating annexation. I think what I shared with the city is that our goal, while I can speak for the council or the county as the planning director, the goal is to have a balanced annexation as the cities annex areas within their urban growth boundary. That's about it. So I'll leave it at that. And this is the concern that the city raised. I can return back to the other chapters and have some of my staff join me here. So let's go back to, let's go to housing chapter. Okay?
Could I ask a question before we leave
Go ahead, Chair.
the land use element? And that's on page 13. It's something that we've already discussed, but related to industrial railroad zone. And I see that it's been moved from just industrial to heavy industrial. And I'm not clear on what the distinction is between heavy industrial and industrial railroad, because they both relate to areas that have access to railroad. Could you, and when was that overlay or that zone developed? It seems like it's fairly recent, but I may be wrong.
Yes, Councillor Chair, that change was made recently. I think we shared with Council that from what I recall, and if that's the case, that at the origin of the railroad operator, I believe in during the 2016 plan update, he proposed adding a railroad industrial as a potential zone that you can change the comp plan from light industrial to industrial railroad, because right now what you have is two type of industrial designation, is either light industrial or heavy. So this addition of railroad industrial was made following the 2016 plan update. We still have it in our zoning in Title 40. The use list in heavy is pretty much, in heavy industrial is very much the same as railroad industrial. What we don't have, when you look at a map, and I know you have a map, some of you have a map in your office. If you look at the map, majority of what we have is light industrial. Where you have heavy is in the Shilashi Bluff area, which is in the rural area. There is one little piece, I believe, in Brush Perry, that is heavy industrial, very small. And then the majority of the other heavy industrial are the port. That's it. So this industrial railroad was added again in Councilor Marshall in 2016, following that plan adoption. In chapter 3, which is the rural element, you will see the changes that we have made consistent with your direction to remove the overlay and other policies that gets to the freight rail dependent use. I will get to that when we get to chapter 3. But Councillor, this is when it was in following the 2016 plan update, that's when the change was made.
I still don't quite understand. It makes sense that it would be under heavy industrial rather than light industrial, but I still don't quite see what the distinction between the two are.
I agree with you. There are no distinction when you look at the use list, not in the light industrial, but the heavy industrial and railroad industrial, the use are just identical. But the reason for this is because you have to do a zone change to get to this, or plan amendment to get to this railroad industrial use, because that is not allowed at this point. It's like a designation. You don't see anywhere in the comp plan where you have railroad industrial designation. So you have to do a zone change, and you have to go to the hearing examiner, who has to review that and maybe grant it or deny it. But
Okay.
you know, if the council through this process asks that section be repealed, that's your call. It can be done through this process, but that is the distinction, because there is nowhere on the existing comp plan where you have a designation of railroad industrial. Doesn't exist. So this is another way for them to change light industrial to this particular designation, so that they can do the use list under this provision.
Okay.
So just, are you finished here, or did you have additional comments?
Yeah,
Oh.
I'll be thinking about this more, but that's
Okay.
all my questions for
That's
today.
kind of where I'm at right now too, is thinking about it, but I'm just wanting to clarify on this. And then I have a couple other comments before we move forward too.
Okay.
Is so my understanding is essentially we have this in here to avoid the process that's required with rezone from light industrial to heavy industrial where rail facilities exist. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. And then just a quick comment on the annexation. I do support leaving it as it is. I think part of the reason that we're in some of the predicament that we're in right now is because there's not been enough intentional ahead of time planning for annexation. So I support leaving it the language the same. And then could we go back to 1.1.14 real quickly? Yes, that one right there. Yeah, right there. So I do agree. So the green part there, we're changing from jobs at higher density to greater economic benefit. I agree that jobs at a higher density is not the entirety of what we need, but I also feel greater economic benefit also does not. I don't know if we could add something like to be greater economic benefit that is also considering overall land consumption, something to that nature, because I think density is important. We do want to target jobs that are not only well-paying and good economic benefit, but that are also, uh, being considerate of the amount of land that's consumed in that use. So I don't know if that's possible.
Again, no decision today. You can make that as a motion. This is just what we are being proposed, but I made a notation on this. When we come to hearing, we can
Sure.
share with the planning commission and the public can weigh in. When we come before you, you can make that motion if that's what the planning commission and the public advances to the council. Yeah, you can make that motion during your hearing that language be added.
Okay. Yeah. As long as you track it and make sure
Yes.
we bring that up, that would be great.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before we move on? Okay.
Okay. Let's go to the next chapter if you can return to the slide. Okay, here's the housing element, and I know that one of my staff that worked on this is sitting in the audience, Amy Woodson. Like I said earlier, I give them credit. They've worked very hard on each of these chapters. Amy, I know you want to sit with me here. So this is the housing chapter. I don't want to take anything away from Amy. So Amy will go through this chapter, and then both Amy and I are here to answer questions. So Amy, take it away.
Good morning, Council. Good morning, Council. As Oliver said, my name is Amy Wooten, and I am a planner in community planning. Today, I'm just going to give you an overview of the changes we're proposing for Chapter 2, the housing element in the comprehensive plan. A lot of the strike-throughs and underlines that you'll find in the chapter are really just making grammar corrections and updating syntax, but we are updating a lot of the tables in the chapter. If you could go to page 4. There's 13 tables in the chapter that we updated. They contain demographic information, housing statistics relating to population trends, age, ethnicity, the number of households in the county, the makeup of those households, income, etc. In order to update those tables, I utilized 2020 United States Decennial Census information, American Community Survey information, housing market data provided by the University of Washington Center for Real Estate Research, Washington Department of Commerce website, and Washington State Office of Financial Management. Other partners that we invited to help us update this chapter include the Vancouver Housing Authority and Clark County Treasurer. They help to provide updated information regarding county funding sources for affordable housing and subsidized housing. Updates in this chapter also generally reflect changes in housing requirements prescribed in 2021 through House Bill 1220. And are especially focused on planning for sufficient land capacity for housing needs, providing for moderate density housing options within the UGA, identifying racially disparate impacts and displacement and exclusion, and making adequate provisions for housing for existing and projected needs for all economic segments of the community. If you want to go to page 13 for me. Page 13.
Can we zoom in just a little bit too? It's really difficult to see at the size that it's at. Great, thank you.
Page 13 covers county funding for affordable housing, and it's been updated to describe current use of the Community Development Block Grant. I get kind of tongue-tied on that. And home funds and the use of the 1% sales tax that will generate approximately $6.5 million a year to be used for affordable housing and mental health programs. And then page 18. This is a new section that covers racially disparate impacts and displacement. It addresses impacts to historically vulnerable persons and provides statistical data that evaluated housing policies and how regulatory barriers affect access to housing for moderate, low income, and very low income populations. Page 19 is the beginning of the summary section, and there were not really any significant changes there. And then page 28 is where the goals and policies section starts. There aren't any changes there. We brought the section to you last August for your review. So that's kind of a brief overview. Are there any questions?
Go ahead, Counselor.
Yeah, I'd just like to hear a little bit more about the racial impacts, just some of the conclusions there, just broad strokes of what we learned from that.
Well, the section really just discusses how neutral policies historically and practices have affected underrepresented populations in the county. It doesn't get into real specifics, but I think it does investigate, redlining practices and things of that nature.
Can you just scroll down slowly? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councillors, the only thing I will add, I know there may be another question. The only thing I will add is that as we further refine the preferred plan, we will be able to show council how, in addition with our local jurisdictions, how they have planned for various income bands so that you can see that, either by zoning or by plan designation. I know Councillor Little asked for that last time we had discussion on housing, so we'll work with our local jurisdiction to provide that based on how available lands are zoned.
Chair?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. That was actually my question. I would like to better understand how the county is meeting our in the income bands that were assigned to us and all of the cities. So that will be coming later.
Yes, we'll be working with our local jurisdictions, excuse me, councillors, to provide that based on the zoning and the densities that they're allowing. That is forthcoming. We are making that request to our local jurisdictions, and the county map will also illustrate that.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, is there any requirement that the cities equally provide different types of housing in each income bracket, or is it just have to be provided by the whole county in whole?
The way that planning for all housing tool is designated, the county using that based on the population arrived at about, give or take, 100,000 new units that was suballocated to the county, to each of the jurisdictions. So they would then have to plan how to provide for various income band within their own jurisdiction. The county is not obligated to provide that 100,000 total countywide. So that was housing unit that was suballocated in various income band to the county unincorporated area and then to each of the local jurisdiction, and they're going through the process to show how they're going to accommodate that.
Thanks. Was each city allocated equally?
I wouldn't say equally. That was a discussion, and I don't know whether that discussion occurred before you joined the council, but I know there was the city of Commerce raised some concern, and I believe other cities finally agreed with the way that the allocation was made. I don't know, Councillor Later, you may have, Councillor Glenn, you may have recalled that. I wouldn't call it preferential treatment, but there was accommodation made by the concerns raised by the city of Commerce. We can provide that to you at a later time so you can see how that was the share that went to Commerce and each of the cities.
Yeah, I would assume different cities have different logistical challenges on providing different types of housing. I was just curious if they were all allocated originally equal amounts for each income band.
Technically, I would say yes. And I use the word technically, I would say yes, because there is a provision in this county-wide planning policy for what we call fair share of the housing need, that be shared equally, because you don't want to overburden one community with just, okay, Vancouver or Washugo, you gotta build all the multi-family or apartments, and we're not gonna build any. So as part of that fair share of housing type, it was an agreed through the county-wide planning policy that each community will have their own share. They would then have to plan on how to accommodate that. There is another provision as part of the new bill that passed that requires the city of, I believe, Vancouver, Washugo, and Commerce to plan for different type of housing. And if they don't, that the an ordinance developed by the Department of Commerce will go into effect in those jurisdictions if they fail to show how they're going to accommodate those requirements. So they're working on that.
Okay, thank you for that context.
You bet.
Chair,
Oh,
just
go ahead.
want to add my recollection of how things played out related to Camas and the allocation. And I don't know that it was so much that all of these cities agreed, but the county agreed to take a portion that was allocated to Camas. And so that's got absorbed into probably largely Vancouver's unincorporated area that is the county.
Sure. And I would just kind of add a nuance around this, and that is that every jurisdiction in our county has got to work really hard to make housing more affordable and have more options available to everyone. But I think it's really important that we also understand that the market will only bear what it bears. And, if we allocate a certain number to a jurisdiction and they rezone, do all those things that they need to facilitate that, but that development doesn't take place because of feasibility, then we've really created more of a problem. So I think there needs to be that balance between everybody doing their part, but also recognizing the realities of some of the market activity that takes place. So I think, from my understanding of the history of it, that was the attempted balance that we came to.
Both you and Councillor Marshall are correct. So you will see the information as we glean them from our local jurisdictions, or how they zone and plan to accommodate the housing allocated to each of their jurisdiction. If there are no questions on housing, I will then go to the rural element. Okay, councillors, one of my staff that worked on this is Bat, and Bat is joining me here. So I'm sharing the love. So here's Bat, and Bat, take it away on the housing element. What have changed since we came to the council with this particular chapter?
I think we just talked about housing, but we'll briefly touch the rural chapter. Thank you, Oliver, Bart Catching, community planning. This chapter, you've already seen the goals and policies, like for many of the most of the chapters, and so those are in effect the real meat of the chapter, and there are no changes to that other than one that we'll touch at the very end. Scrolling down to page, let's see, the first yellow there. You'll see this in several of the chapters. You've heard much from our great coworker Jenna Kay with the work on the climate chapter. This is just a new reference to the climate chapter and how you will see various notes within the text. Again, we approached when Jose and I went through chapter 3, we approached it with a light touch, with the perspective that we were only going to make updates, as Oliver said at the beginning of this, things that were either Scrivener's errors or code updates from the state level that we needed to update. If you could scroll down to the next yellow highlight there. Thank you, Jake. That things like just numerical code references, things like that. Let me find, if you could scroll down, there's a couple of tables in this chapter. You also saw this in the land use chapter. Now that we have the preferred alternative, we have finally some new numbers that we can crunch and push through. So there's a couple of placeholder notes in this chapter. You'll see we're working with GIS to get some updated numbers. Those will be updated in the newest iteration, well before this gets to the final hearing. If you could scroll down a little bit further past that to, don't think there's anything else major.
Highlight those policies.
Here, pause there.
Policies that, remember the code discrepancy.
Which one?
On this mining.
Oh, yeah. I'll talk that. Yeah,
Okay.
we talked about that.
Okay.
Yes. This is an example of just a code update that didn't make any substantive change. It was just, as we going through, you could see, oh, there was a WAC citation, and since we've all been thinking about the ag lands, there's an example of a textual update that added clarity. If you could scroll down to, I don't think there was anything else. Right there, just updating to make it match the parks chapter, things like that. So again, a light touch on the textual parts of the chapter. Nothing major, nothing as heavy duty as what you were just talking about. As with housing, when we look at the goals and policies, again, we brought these to you the first pass at this last year. And again, the stuff in yellow are things that you've already, the highlights in yellow are things that you've already seen. Just to update, like you've seen in many of the chapters, we have these little bracketed notes for climate related items that tie back to the new climate legislation and the new chapter that's being added to the plan. If you could scroll down to, where is it? Just keep going. Keep going. You'll see it. There's a chunk here on right there. So we talked about this last year, but as Oliver was just reminding me so that I can remind you all, this section in the mineral lands area, it was brought to our attention last year that there was a discrepancy in the existing plan that was had not incorporated a update from the Mineral Lands Task Force resolution. And so this new language reflects what the council had actually adopted. I think it was in 2014.
Yeah.
2014.
Yeah.
So that's no change from what you saw last year. We just wanted to remind why that big chunk was highlighted. And then scroll down to the very bottom, last page. Right there. This is the other location where we had reference to the freight rail dependent use. So at the direction of recent direction of council, we have struck this language to reflect the state legislature's action on this item. So that is in green because that is new since the last time you saw this. Those are the things that I wanted to highlight about chapter 3, and happy to answer questions if I can.
Councilor Young?
Sure.
Yeah, back to the greenhouse gas emissions related to my previous question about specifics. It looks like in that section, we're just indicating whether a policy has a positive or a negative effect on greenhouse gas emissions. Is that sufficient for what is required under state law, or do we have to get into specific numbers of greenhouse gas tonnage? How specific do we have to get on our plan?
Councillor Little, yes. Recall that we came to council asking you at what end year do you want to set some target? I think there was a discussion about 2045, 2050, to whatever. So I think the council gave us direction to go to 2050, if I recall. So it is that target based on other goals and policies and strategies that we are going to be monitoring and reporting out every 5 years how well we are doing. And that is why I've reached out to the county manager, and we'll be having discussion on other departments on what and how we are going to be implementing the climate bill so that everyone is on board, whether it's through county, public works, fleet. Are we moving into buying electric cars going forward? What are we doing internally? The same will be true with what are we doing in resiliency? How are we doing? Are we going to, for example, adopt a tree ordinance, which we don't have? Those type of things are in the climate element. It's just how we implement it and then report out.
Okay, very helpful. Thank you.
You bet, sir. So, Councillor Shiamacho, this is where in this chapter is where we deleted the reference to, as Bat indicated, the reference to the freight rail dependent use and the policies associated with that. When I came before you, I said we should leave the transportation section out in terms of deletion, because those transportation policies doesn't relate to freight rail. But I think you may have gotten some emails and comment from some county resident recommending some changes to the transportation policies as it relates to their concerns. You will hear that during your final hearing on this and through the Planning Commission. If you adopt those, we will make those changes when it becomes final. But we have done this per your directive and consistent with the bill that the legislature recently passed.
Great, thank you. I do have a quick question on 3.1.8 related to sewer lines. There was added language And I just wondered, I know the schools, I believe, were always allowed to extend sewer to schools outside of a growth boundary, but is the regional parks, was that a change at the legislative level, or was it always the case that lines could be extended?
I think the exception to sewer provision included could include regional park for health reasons. Yeah,
Okay.
it's not. Yeah, it's not new, Councillor.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. So if there are no questions, this is taking longer, but I appreciate your indulgence. We will now go into the mobile home. And yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Welcome, Elizabeth. I was just thinking, I think this is year 4 that you're working through these issues with us. Year 6. Oh my. Well, pleasure to have you here.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so councillors, again, if I may, I appreciate all the help that Elizabeth Tridje Consulting have been working with us from the beginning of the host development of the host app and continuing with the implementation of that. They are the housing experts that we have brought on board to help us implement that. And in addition to that, they are working with us on this mobile home park issue following your moratorium. They have helped us to put a scope of work, and I don't want to take anything away from Elizabeth, but this is a memo that she put together, and it's part of her discussion with you this morning. So this particular item, I would like direction from council on how you would like us to proceed. This is the one where I would like some direction from council. So Elizabeth, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Oliver. Elizabeth Decker with Jet Planning. Here to talk to you about some code concepts addressing manufactured home parks that, you know, as it turns out, just so many pressing issues that are interrelated with housing and opportunities to prevent displacement here. So if you would, please. We'll just go over a little background today about parks, mobile home parks, manufactured home communities, take your pick. A lot of those terms are used interchangeably. Manufactured homes is the most up to date because as it turns out, part of the issue is that these homes aren't very mobile. So that is what you'll most often see. A little bit of background, then we'll go into our recommendation of what code in terms of an overlay district could address some of the issues we're seeing around manufactured home parks. And that's really where we're looking for your feedback, particularly on a component of that about whether to permit other types of housing that's designated affordable within a proposed manufactured home park zone or not. And then we'll turn it to discussions, questions, any clarifications that you have, as well as getting your direction on whether you'd like to see us move forward with drafting some code language around a new manufactured home park zone. And so that's the direction we're looking for today, as Oliver mentioned. Next, please. All right, so in Clark County, there are an existing 34 parks that total a little over 2,000 homes. So that's a significant, sort of subset of housing, a particular housing type. These parks vary widely in terms of size and age, as well as their zoning. So the size goes anywhere from 4 homes to over 100 homes, median's about 50 homes, sites, anywhere from 5 to 10 acres. As well as a few larger. The majority of them are located in the urban growth areas. About 74% of the parks are in mostly the Vancouver UGA. So there's a few in Woodland as well. And then the remainder are in rural areas where there are existing non-conforming uses. But because of that, there's really inconsistent zoning, not just in the rural areas, but even within the UGAs. These parks are zoned everything. Some are zoned, R1 for low density. Some are zoned R for residential uses, which is, currently the only zones, as well as the office residential, that permits these uses outright. But that is not the predominant zoning for the existing parks. There are others with commercial zoning or business park, employment uses. So a real variety. And then, as I mentioned, even though a little less than half of them are in the R zones, these parks tend to be at a lower average density than comparable densities that are designated in those R zones. So we're seeing an average of about 7 units per gross acre, so a little bit more in terms of net. But we just only have it because there's not designated right of way within the parks to subtract from the acreage. It's easier to calculate the gross. And so that's significantly less than some of the comparable multifamily that you might see in residential zones. So when you're just to set up the scene and think about what distinguishes these parks. Next, please. So even though they're a relatively small amount of the overall housing supply, manufactured home parks are a very specific targeted type of housing that meets an important niche that is not really met any other way. So first of all, these are really a uniquely affordable option in terms of providing home ownership for lower income households. There are also a number of parks that are designated 55 plus. And so this makes it a really beneficial type of housing for older adults. All these are single story homes. So that adds to the accessibility, and also some of the fixed costs can support adults living on fixed, or households that are living on fixed incomes, as well as providing sort of an aging in place kind of community. And then they also offer a unique benefit in terms of being both lower cost, but also providing more of a community feel, more of a low density feel, a way to have a detached home in this lower scale context, but at a more accessible price point. However, these parks are also uniquely vulnerable. So what helps with the fixed costs and with household expenses is that the homes are owned individually, but the part that can be outside of households' control is that the lots are rented, and the lot rents can increase in ways that residents can't really control or budget for. And some of those issues have to do with park ownership changes. We're seeing parks move from private ownership by a single family or a smaller company to much larger corporations or like real estate equity groups. But then there's also just aging infrastructure issues. A lot of these parks were built from the 60s through the 80s. And so, we're coming up decades later and running into water and sewer issues. And those are just costly to repair. But that can put some of the residents in a real hard place because there's fewer alternatives to relocate these homes. As I mentioned, they're not actually mobile once they're installed and placed on a foundation. They're difficult to move, and there are very few available sites that are willing to accept a transferred manufactured home. So next, please. So that many of these issues are already on the county's radar and helped inform the county's decision to pass a moratorium on manufactured home park redevelopment about a year ago. That moratorium runs through February of 2027. So we do have a work plan for that time. And part of that is what you're seeing today is the work that's gone into researching this issue and developing some concepts, as well as time to then move forward with implementation. Even predating that moratorium, the Housing Options Study and Action Plan, adopted back in 2022, identified this as a longer-term strategy to look at options to reduce or mitigate displacement in manufactured home parks through tools such as a zoning district. So it's timely that this is coming up. It's also related to existing comp plan language. There are zoning provisions, as I mentioned right now, but they only address manufactured home parks in residential and office residential zones. Another piece that's outside the county's jurisdiction and will be implemented, does not require any county action to participate in, but just for you to understand the context, is that there are a number of state statutes, including recent work, to try to address some of these unique vulnerability issues that were mentioned for parks. So first is that there is new language, new statutes that cap rent increases that park owners can charge on that lot rent to try to get at those concerns mentioned about households and being trapped on lots that they can't afford. There are some provisions in that to reflect major capital improvements. So if there were some of those big infrastructure issues, but certainly that statute has some pros and cons, and different folks will tell you their own opinions about it. But it's intended to protect residents. There's also a longstanding statute that provides for increased notification periods if there is going to be a park closure, to let residents know and give them more time to try to come up with an alternative option. And part of that includes a new legislation around a tenant opportunity to purchase provisions, which gives tenants some time to organize and try to form an entity to purchase the park and then run the park as a cooperative themselves. So I think those are well-intended provisions. There have been several efforts in Clark County with recent, both in the county as well as within City of Vancouver boundaries, parks that were facing closure where residents attempted to use those and just still came up against a lot of hurdles, some of them just financial realities in terms of cost, but as well as timing and just ability to respond. But it is a tool that is intended to help address some of these displacement concerns that we're looking at. But all of that is in addition to any zoning strategies that the county specifically may choose to consider. So next, please. So in terms of our process during this moratorium, part of it, we started with engagement with some stakeholders that are well-versed in manufactured home parks. And so that included talking to a representative of the manufactured park owners group that has both regional as well as state representation. And the number one message that Scott Hess is the gentleman that I spoke to there. The number one message he wanted to pass along is zoning is one thing, but what they're really looking for is financial support and incentives to deal with some of those infrastructure issues. So separate conversation, but I wanted to convey his message for you. And we also had a chance to talk to some housing nonprofits, including a group that specializes in assisting tenants with those tenant opportunity to purchase opportunities. And also locally with Evergreen Habitat for Humanity, who's working on a specific project for one of the manufactured home sites here in the county. The county has heard significantly from residents throughout the public hearings for the moratorium. So we took that input as a first phase. And then the next phase where we propose to go and work with the residents is really after we hear your direction and as we've developed some concepts, we propose to go to them and have an open house in which we can sort of share the proposed direction and hear any refinement. But because we had that early input from them, that will be our next step. The process, we also use this moratorium time to do some case studies, including City of Vancouver has just worked on this issue and just adopted their own manufactured home park zone. And so being able to both read that and talk to staff about the issues was really helpful. And then here we are at our council work session as part of this process, looking for your direction. We have a goal to include any zoning that comes out of this and any other measures on manufactured home parks with the comp plan, but we do have through that moratorium period if time is needed for that. So next, please. So as I mentioned, part of the process was doing some case studies. And so I would say this is not developing a manufactured home park zone is not a universal strategy that Washington cities have adopted, but among the subset of cities that have, there is a very prevalent approach to create a single use zone for manufactured home parks. And when I say single use, what it means is it's a zone that singly permits manufactured home parks and does not permit other uses to avoid competition and redevelopment pressures that could squeeze out that manufactured home park. So although that overall approach is pretty uniform in cities that have taken up a zoning strategy to address displacement. The development standards that cities have for parks, things like what's the minimum or maximum density, what's the spacing, what are the setbacks, those really range. That doesn't seem to be a set of uniform best practices across the state. And the county already has a set of standards that they've worked out. We don't see, a little bit of a spoiler here. We don't see a lot of changes that need to go there. There's not a lot of ways in which the county, would need to sort of meet other state or best practices there. But one of the most important aspects that makes these single-use zones effective is that they include a use exception requirement almost uniformly. And what that is intended to do is to say, if an applicant that has a park that's zoned only for park development wants to redevelop to a different use, they have to come forward in a legislative type 4 process and demonstrate, and apply for that zone change and demonstrate that there's no reasonable use of the park and that it's not economically viable before that zone change could be approved. And so that's really intended to be an opportunity to have a conversation and say, this park is serving a very important part of the housing needs. And, if that's not viable, there is an escape valve, but we want to make sure that park owners have considered all their options before approving a rezone. So one of the most interesting case studies that we were able to do sort of in real time, talking to the staff at City of Vancouver as they were developing their own manufactured home park zone that was just adopted, was it just last month? But recently with their comp plan, follows, the main tenets of these manufactured home park zones as mentioned. And a notable feature of their zone is that they also introduced, in addition to permitting manufactured home parks outright, they also permit housing that's affordable to households up to 60% of the area median income. And so any housing type that is, restricted by covenant or other, sort of legal mechanism to ensure that affordability can also be permitted outright as redevelopment on manufactured home parks, either a full site or as part of the site to add to some of the manufactured homes already there. And as we'll see, that's going to be a question for the council to see if the county's interested in something similar. So next. So with that brings us to our recommendation. And the main recommendation, shouldn't be too much of a surprise. This is the prevailing zoning approach, is that to help prevent displacement and reduce redevelopment pressure for manufactured home parks in the county, we recommend creating a manufactured home park overlay zone that would apply to the existing manufactured home parks within the UGAs only, would not apply to rural outside of UGAs. And we, just recommend that this is the most direct zoning strategy. It is not in and of itself, from talking to advocates, a strategy that, automatically makes parks more viable or takes away any of those infrastructure questions or concerns. But what it does do is it takes away that threat of redevelopment so that there's sort of one less wolf lurking in the background that could lead to displacement. So to break it down, a few of these components, the reason that this is recommended within urban growth areas and not within rural areas is, one, there's much greater redevelopment pressure within urban growth areas. As mentioned, these parks are zoned a variety of residential that'll allow higher density multifamily or other types of residential, as well as commercial or employment uses that could generate additional redevelopment income. But in rural areas, most of these are non-conforming at higher densities than would otherwise be permitted by the rural zoning, since most of these parks predate GMA. So there's just not the same redevelopment pressure in the rural areas. There's not something else that could be developed that would be more profitable or more intense, as well as the GMA framework right now would not even permit those uses in the rural zones. And so we can't, based on discussions with Commerce, we can't make them conforming uses because they're added density that is not permitted in the rural framework. So best strategy for the rural parks is to leave them as they are with their existing non-conforming status. We recommend, since we've got the comp plan open, a few refinements to the comprehensive plan policies to support to both introduce this manufactured home park overlay zone, as well as to support the general policy of reducing displacement and risk for manufactured home park residents. We recommend this as an overlay zone rather than a new base zone, because the parks are already located in such a variety of zones. Changing the underlying zoning and the comp plan designation could really create some spot zoning that would then have an odd legacy if those parks did come forward for the use exception and rezoning. So we think an overlay zone is a more targeted approach that allows preservation of the park, but then if there are discussions about redevelopment, then it can be done more consistently with the surrounding area. We do, in terms of those development standards for parks, setbacks and separation and garage requirements, those types of things, there's a few opportunities to simplify some of the existing county standards, but not a huge need there. Because some of the parks will be non-conforming uses in rural areas, we do recommend just taking another look there and seeing if there's anything else that can make it feasible to have some flexibility managing those non-conforming uses. We don't want to preserve them in amber. We want there to be enough flexibility that if there's a home that needs to be switched out, if there's an opportunity to, move things around and add 2 homes where there used to be 1, that is permitted and not prohibited by some of the non-conforming use standards. So it can be a living, viable use. We do recommend including the use exception language as we talked about that tool, so that an applicant would have to demonstrate that the existing park is not economically viable to remove that overlay zone and move forward with a different type of redevelopment. And then the last part here is a non-recommendation. You talked a little about TDR earlier today in the agricultural zone. I'll just say this is a totally different type of TDR. But there one city in our case studies in Kenmore used a TDR program to transfer some of the development rights from a property that, say, it's zoned for 30 units per acre multifamily, and the overlay restricts it to make up a number 12 units per acre for manufactured home park. And there are some provisions to transfer that differential, that 18 units per acre, to a different site. So when considering the applicability of that within the county context, as you know, you've heard in the comp plan, one of the biggest things is about creating more housing capacity and increasing the maximum densities in the R zones. And so because the county's already increasing densities so much and the goal is to permit density, we're not seeing a lot of market to transfer that extra increment from a manufactured home park because so much density is already being permitted outright. So given what we anticipate would be really limited applicability or uptake of that, we're not recommending the introduction of a TDR program at this time. So if you would, next. So we're certainly looking for your feedback on all the components of that recommendation, but the biggest question where we don't have a clear recommendation and we're really open to your feedback is about the role for affordable housing in a new manufactured home park overlay if you were to recommend that. So the question is, should other housing types be permitted there if they're restricted to use as affordable housing? And so that could be, I think you could either direct us to allow other housing types, probably middle housing and multifamily, with affordability requirements that could be permitted outright within that manufactured home park overlay, or to stay focused on only the manufactured home park uses within that overlay, to really, let it do its job. While manufactured home parks are serving as a type of naturally occurring affordable housing, other forms of affordable housing, say a multifamily, may or may not be compatible on the same site. So just because they're both affordable doesn't mean that they necessarily, make sense on the same site. And another consideration is that if affordable housing types were not permitted outright, we could work into that use exception, sort of a, go straight to go. That's not how the Monopoly slogan goes, but yes, but just to an outright provision that if you're rezoning to allow affordable housing, that would be a criteria that would support the rezone, rather than needing to go through the, no economically viable use route to meet that criteria. So we could add flexibility another way. And part of the reason this has come up in the county context is you've heard from Evergreen Habitat for Humanity that has is working on purchase of the Hidden Village manufactured home park site, which is pictured here in the aerial. It's really two sites side by side, and they're working on both. And at this point, they're considering redevelopment that would include upgrading and maintaining some of the existing manufactured home parks. But that, as you can see from this aerial, there's quite a bit of undeveloped land there. And so from talking with them, they're still in the early phases of having community conversations about what they might like to do with this site, what other forms of housing, would meet the community needs here, whether that's more manufactured housing, whether that's site-built housing, what form that would take. And so I don't think that we know whether there would be applicability beyond this particular site. We haven't heard from any other manufactured home park operators specifically that this is something they're considering, but we do know there's at least one site considering it. But we also know that they're early enough in the process that trying to guess precisely what type of housing they might wind up proposing, or this is on Highway 99. It's in the overlay. There's also some commercial zoning here. Like, could it include a mix of that? They're open to all those things at this point. So trying to guess precisely what they might want or need may be a little premature in this zone. So it could be more helpful to allow that flexibility to rezone rather than trying to capture it all permitted outright. But we really don't know at this point. So that's why we're looking for your feedback. So next, that just brings us to opportunity for discussion and questions. So thank you.
Go ahead.
I have lots of questions. I don't want to take up all the time, but I want to make sure that if we do this, we're not missing out on other types of housing. As you're bringing up some others, are there other kinds of affordable cluster housing that we haven't thought of, like the small homes that are on a lot that we could potentially include under this umbrella? Is that what you're proposing, that there's other types that we could include under this zoning?
That is something that could be permitted with the manufactured home park overlay. That's the question about whether to allow other affordable housing types.
Okay. And then obviously we want to not create disincentives for people to create new affordable housing and new mobile home parks. So with the overlay that you're proposing, if I bought a property and decided to create a mobile park community, would that overlay automatically be applied to my property, or would it be added later, or how would that happen for a new mobile park or new affordable housing units?
Yeah, thanks, Counselor. I guess I'd just preface by saying Clark County hasn't seen a new manufactured home park since the 90s. And so that, we'd love to see more, but they are difficult. The only folks that I spoke to that were interested in adding new parks was the representative. It's called Northwest Community Development Corporation. Then they help with resident-owned communities and that tenant opportunity to purchase. And, she stated that she would love to help, if she had the right site, to help develop a new manufactured home park. That is something that their organization considers, but most market rate developers at this point, particularly on the west side of the Cascades in Washington, are not interested. The economics do not add up to do a new manufactured home park.
Yeah, that's my worry.
Yeah,
that's my worry, that we're creating even more disincentives. We're trying to lock in the 2,000 homes that are affordable now, but we may be adding another layer that prevents future ones. I'm wondering if there's a way to do this in a way that we're also creating an incentive for a new landowner to actually, for something to pencil out for them as well. That's one thought. Do you have anything to say about that? And I have more questions.
I don't, but in terms of where new mobile home parks are allowed, nothing we are proposing that will prohibit that. And I think your question is, will the overlay in the future be applied to that property? Overlay is not automatic. They have to apply for it. And then we'll have to bring it to Council and Planning Commission for your consideration after reviewing what the overlay means it is up to the property owner to decide whether they would like it to apply to their newly manufactured home. But nothing we are proposing would prohibit new mobile home parks where they are currently permitted.
Okay, I'm just trying to put my position in an owner's perspective that I would not want an overlay on my property to lock up my potential reuse in the future. What about the challenges that they're finding with current state law that they're not able to pull together the resources and time to meet the requirements to purchase their own park, and also the restrictions on rent control? Apparently, we have heard from the community that they aren't sufficient. Is there anything at the county level that we can do to add to state law on either of those things to make it better for the tenants during this process?
Yeah, thanks for those considerations. I'd have to work with county council to read into those RCWs and see if there's additional latitude for the county, or if the state provisions provide control.
Okay, thank you.
But I will make a note of that.
Chair, do you have any comments? I've got a long list of questions. This is one
Okay,
of the things that are important to me. So go ahead if you have
Yeah.
some.
I have a shorter list, I'm sure. So a few things. I think it would behoove us to do as close whatever we decide to do as the city of Vancouver, because if it's largely in their growth area and they're looking at annexation strategies, it would be good to be compatible with what they're doing, if not exactly the same. I am also concerned about the manufactured home parks outside of a UGA, and I'm thinking specifically of Brush Prairie along Chalachi Railroad, who have been are feeling threatened with how land along the railroad might be developed in the future. So I'd like to know how many manufactured units there are and parks in the rural area and what we can do to better protect those. The overriding concern for me is protection of existing affordable housing, and that a lot of these folks will just simply be displaced, and they'll have economic liability to decommission their units. So that's my overriding concern, is protecting folks that are currently, because it's an elderly population, it's lower income population, and I would not want to contribute to an increasing homeless population. So I think the single use zone makes sense. I do think we might look at state legislation if the timing for residents to own there in a cooperative way park, whatever barriers there might be there, that would be worthwhile to take a look at that as well. Yeah, so those are my thoughts, I think, at this point.
Councilor Belcott?
I have the same concerns in my district. I have quite a number of mobile home parks in District 2 that I am interested in protecting those folks. I think Bear, who's come and talked to council a couple of different times, has mentioned a few of those. So, but I, like Councilor Little, am worried about potential restrictions. So I think maybe we need to look a little more into the impacts. So just some food for thought.
All right, I will get started with my question. This has been an issue that has been very important to me for a long time. And so I would like to, when we talked about like affordable, I think the problem that we're trying to solve here is to reduce pressure for redevelopment. I think that is the ultimate goal. because the redevelopment of these places will significantly harm the individuals that currently live there in many, many ways. One, it uproots their lives. It is a significant financial loss to them because they own their unit. And if they are for some reason required to relocate or demolish most likely their unit, that is a massive loss for them. And I know that there are some levels of state protection, but I don't think that they go far enough. And these folks are very genuinely nervous and anxious all the time about the risk of one day getting a letter saying you're going to have to move your home that's not movable, right? So I think that is the overall intent of the overlay, is to reduce that pressure. The state law that put a rent cap on there inadvertently increased that pressure. When people purchase these parks, they are looking to make a profit. And if there are two methods of making profit, and you reduce the ability to make a profit on one of those ways, then it will incentivize that other way. And that other way, the one way that we have restricted is the rent cap. One way is to come in and increase the rent, or create improvements that increase the value. And then of course you need to be able to pay for those improvements, so it would become with the rent increase. But now that those rent increases are significantly limited, it's put pressure and more incentive towards just redevelopment, displacing these folks and redeveloping into a separate use. So when we come and we talk about other uses and other types, I am absolutely open to that, but we need to be very careful that, again, we're not increasing pressure we have responsible park owners and we have irresponsible park owners, that we're not creating an incentive towards pressuring people out, so that space opens up so that we can reuse it for something else, so we need to be careful with that caveat. I think working with Habitat for Humanity is a great idea for being able to understand that, because I think they're looking at doing something like that. There's some open space, but how do we evaluate what uses we should allow, and how does that impact the people that are already there? But I am absolutely in favor of having a significant affordability required on any time that redevelopment is allowed. And I would say max or minimum of 60% AMI, not 80%. That tends to be the number that's used. 80% doesn't really provide much public benefit. I too had questions about whether we can tighten some, whether the state has the only jurisdiction, or they are establishing minimum rules that we can add in addition to, and that would be like tenant protection laws, intentional neglect. If you have a path to where you only have to show financial feasibility, it can prevent create a situation where somebody would stand to benefit from intentionally neglecting the maintenance issues in the park, because the longer those issues are not addressed, the more financially unfeasible it becomes to address them. So, how we do that, I don't know, and I'm looking to you for potential solutions. One of I did have on did a little bit of a different subject, but when we're looking at the comprehensive plan update and the assumptions that we made, were we assuming that the mobile home parks would stay at the same density level that they are, or were we assuming some level of redevelopment?
They are, that's a good question, Councilor. They are excluded from calculation of density or redevelopment.
Okay, great. That's excellent to know. And I'm curious too, when we were talking about potentially new parks opening, I mean, I would be interested in understanding the exact economics that are, and maybe regulations that are preventing from that from happening, particularly with, we talk about 6.8 units per acre. And I don't know that we're going to have any land in the UGA. I don't believe we will, that would allow that level of density. So when we're looking at mobile home parks, what is the highest level of density that you can achieve? And is it even achievable in the minimum density requirements that we're going to have coming through the comprehensive plan update? I'd love to look into ways, and this might be part of our upcoming process in looking at affordability, or the affordable housing funding that we're collecting, and strategies for how we can work with that fund. But I would really like to see if we can help reduce or eliminate some of those barriers that are allowing people to establish co-ops and to own their own parks. I'd also like to know if we can, similar to what Councilor Little had brought up, is can we increase the notification requirements beyond what the state has required, especially when it comes to first right of refusal, actually giving them a legitimate amount of time to try to form a co-op and create the possibility of ownership of their own park. And then I also, again, state, and how can we do more, but I would like us to understand better what compensation requirements are there for folks that are displaced due to redevelopment, and see if we can look at that and if we can potentially add to that. And the biggest thing and the most challenging is figuring out the method by which an owner would need to determine and prove to the county that redevelopment is necessary, and that keeping it as it is currently used is not financially feasible. So that, I think, is the single most important thing that we have to work on. When you look at the terms that we were using, I think like reasonable use or financial feasibility, those can vary widely. One could argue that simply if it's more profitable one way than the other, that the other way is not financially feasible. So kind of the devil's in the details on this one. I think that we need to be very, very intentional about this and very careful that we don't, as an unintended consequence, create a situation that contributes to like a downward spiral that the park can escape, where conditions there continue to worsen. So finding that balance is probably the single most difficult thing in this process, but I'm hoping to see some more recommendations for how we can very specifically define those times and what has to be proven in order for redevelopment to be allowed. So I think those are all of my questions. I don't know if you have any answers at this point. I'm welcome to hear them, but I think probably a lot of this is going to be a little bit more research that has to be done.
Do you want to address his questions? And I have a couple summary things.
Yeah, sure. I would just first state thank you for your interest and commitment on this issue. And a lot of this is out in addition to the zoning strategies we're talking about. So we're making some notes in those parts. We will need to do some more research and come back to you on. I have, certainly noted adding some specifics about the use exception process. Is there anything else about, about your interest in moving forward with the manufactured home park overlay zone that you'd like to share at this time?
Just that I'm absolutely supportive of moving forward. Yeah.
Counselor?
Thanks for the clarification.
Go ahead.
I do have a little to add, because I'm not sure if we were clear on whether we all have any direction on whether keeping it within the urban growth areas or expand. At least I would be interested, like the chair, to look at the areas in the rural that might be where community members might be impacted, like along the railway, and just see if there's an opportunity to do it outside of the UGAs, and just hear the disadvantages to doing that as well. Okay. And then as for expanding this beyond mobile home parks, I think I would be interested in looking into some of the nuances you described with existing mobile parks, but I'd be very hesitant to have this overlay be able to apply to any kind of affordable housing. I'm still thinking of if I was a landowner and I wanted to do something good for the community and create a cluster of tiny homes to make affordable housing. I would not want an overlay put over me to limit what I do in the future, because I assume some of the funding that I would get for providing that housing would maybe be provided by a grant or some kind of government funding that would subsidize my costs as an owner. And if that funding source ended, I would, as an owner, I would want the freedom to be able to make changes on my property. And so I wouldn't want to create a disincentive of having an overlay that could be slapped onto any affordable housing project. To me, as someone who wants to go into something that would create that kind of housing, it would be a disincentive. So at least for me, I would like to keep it toward focus on mobile home parks, which is what the community brought to us.
I think, if I may, I think there's a way that we could solve that. And if you think about the process of this, and I think one of the primary, if you know, when we look into it, I think probably one of the primary reasons we don't see these being developed is typically they were built in areas where land was cheap. Land's not cheap anywhere anymore. So I think that's probably really the single most prohibiting factor. But this is an issue with aging parks. It's not with new ones. Because once they have spent the significant investment to develop the park, there's no financial feasibility to immediately evicting everybody and redeveloping to something else. So we could just put a certain age limit on a park for the overlay, like any parks that are over 30 years old or, you know, something to that nature. That gives a property owner plenty of time to do what they want with the property without really, you know, restricting their rights. But then as the park ages and some of those elements become more prevalent, then the overlay kicks in. Might be something we can consider.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, if I could just offer one clarification, Councilor Little. When we talk about whether or not to permit affordable housing under this overlay, that would be on sites with manufactured home parks. The proposal would not be that that overlay would then apply to any affordable housing development. It's just about flexibility for.
Yeah, and I would be
redevelopment
supportive
on
of
site.
that.
Yes.
Thanks.
I have nothing more to add. I know I took some notes. Some of the issues or questions raised may be something that, you know, the council will work through recommendation to the legislature to permit. Some of those you may not be able to do on your own. So, but it could come through legislative action. I hear your concern. We can write this to apply to existing mobile home park constructed from this time to this time, so that it will prevent applying this in the future to new, say, cluster of affordable housing unit or tiny village, whatever you might want to call it. So noted. Councillors, this brings our work session to a conclusion. We will be coming to you July. If we can go to the next slide, next steps. This is the upcoming work sessions, July 15th. As the transportation staff indicated, we'll come with the transportation chapter, the capital facilities plans and associated appendices. And then on 22nd, we'll come back with housing and transportation code related work, the procedural chapter, and any of the remaining appendices. And then on July 29th, we'll come back with impact fees. There are several school districts that are proposing are submitting their capital facilities plan with the associated impact fees. And then there's about 6 6 fire districts that are proposing a new fire impact fee, and they will be submitting. So we'll be reviewing that on July 29th. I also know that there is a tentative date for July 29th, so it might be a packed work session on the 29th. It might be discussion about concurrency and 179 on the 29th. So be prepared to talk about fees and costs and so forth on the 29th. But I also want to add that what we are doing now is consistent with the schedule that the council approved, and it's helping our PA's office when they look at what we have accomplished, that if we are, remember, we still have July, so that when they ask for an extension, they can be able to say, this is what we have done and this is what we are doing. So we are making progress. I'll leave it at that. So thank you for this long work session today, unlike the one that occurred on June 10th. Thank you, councilors.
And if I could, just really quick, you guys had a lot of great discussion and feedback. I just wanted to clarify for the public and council that this is not final action during the work session. This is just providing some initial feedback for staff to move forward. Does that work? Okay, thank you.
Great. Just want to thank everybody for the great conversation and all the work involved in this. And with that, we are adjourned and we will return to council time at 1 o'clock this afternoon.